Okay, well, good afternoon slash evening. Welcome to the MEALA Annual Conference Virtual Breakout Session. I'm your moderator, Rebecca Ranieri. A few housekeeping items. We ask that you keep your microphone on mute until you need to ask a question. You can ask your questions at any time by entering them into the chat panel. We will be saving all questions until the end of the presentation. After the session, please take a moment to provide feedback to our presenters by filling out the session's evaluation form located on the conference portal. Today's presentation is You Got Surveyed, Assessing Course Reserves in a Private STEM+B University. And our speakers are Josh Olson, Jody Coulter, and Marcy Uper. And I will go ahead and turn that over to you.
Thank you. Oh, and then could you allow me to share my screen, please?
I am making you co-host as we speak. You should be able to have that option there. You might want to close the window and open it back up again to get it to appear.
Okay, are we all good? Okay, all right. So hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. And also thank you to MEALA for allowing us to present. So this is You Got Surveyed, Assessing Course Reserves in a Private STEM+B University. Before I start, I just want to provide a little, just kind of a quick prologue. Our presentation was scheduled for 2020. So many of the slides that you'll see here will have they were created prior to last spring, so hence some of our updated slides that we will be sharing and discussing as we progress. Okay, so I am Josh Olson. I'm the head of Collections Access for Kettering University Library in Flint, Michigan. I earned my MFA in creative writing, specifically poetry, in 2005 from Minnesota State University, Mankato. After which I moved with my family here to Michigan, where I taught writing at the University of Michigan Ann Arbor and Wayne State in Detroit until 2015, when I received my MLIS from Wayne State. And I've been in my current position at Kettering since October 2017.
Hi, I am Marcy Uper, and I'm the Access Services Specialist at Kettering University in Flint, Michigan with Josh. I began my library career as a page at Genesee District Library, where I worked for 9 years. I then worked as a library specialist at Davenport University for 7 years. I earned my BA in Social Science Joint Program from the University of Michigan Flint in 2007, and I have been at Kettering in my current position since April of 2018.
And my name is Jody Coulter. I'm currently the Life Sciences and Outreach Librarian at the University of Maryland in College Park. I work as a liaison to entomology and biology and a couple of other departments. I'm currently researching some analog data collection and reuse in the sciences and research support services in STEM libraries, as well as data equity and sustainability issues. Before joining the University of Maryland, though, I did work at Wayne State University as a special collections cataloger and School of Information GSA, and at Kettering University, which is where I met Josh and Marcy as a public services STEM librarian.
So a little about the university. What is now Kettering University was founded in Flint, Michigan in 1919 as the School of Automotive Trades. We just celebrated our centennial before everything happened, so yay. After a few name changes and eventual acquisition by General Motors in 1926, we became General Motors Institute, or GMI, until 1998, when the current name change took effect. Branching from its automotive roots, the institution has evolved into a private STEM+B university, and we offer undergraduate degrees in biology, business, chemistry, computer science, mathematics, physics, and pre-med. Kettering also offers graduate degrees in business, engineering, management, and manufacturing. As of fall 2019, our student body was made up of 2,315 students, both undergraduate and graduate. And of this enrollment, 54.1% of the students were still mechanical engineering majors, which is a residual effect of the longstanding cooperation with GM in which they made their own engineers in-house. A little about the library. The library is staffed by 15 permanent employees, 7 of who are librarians, and it is headed by our university librarian. The Kettering University Archives and the Humanities Arts Center also fall under library purview. The archives are housed at Grant Dort Factory 1 in Flint, which happens to be the birthplace of General Motors, so that's very exciting. Prior to March 2020, the library was open a lot more hours than it is now, 7:30 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday through Thursday, 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday, and 12 noon to 11 p.m. on Sundays. And we were open 24 hours a day during finals week, of which we have 4 per year. The library itself owns more than 38,000 circulating books, in addition to graphic novels, DVDs, video games and consoles, laptops, tablets, graphing calculators, and other circulating technology in our library of things. And we also have access to it varies from time to time, 175 electronic databases. We are currently reside in the historic academic building, which was the first main structure on campus, but we will be moving to the Learning Commons, which is currently under construction across the road and is scheduled to open in 2022.
Okay, so our primary emphasis today is on the course reserves program. So the Kettering University Library has had some type of course reserves in one form or another, basically for the duration of the library. However, those were previously made available either by donation, through specific faculty request, or titles that we just already happened to own by the library, and it turned into a material that was being required for a course. The course reserves program as it currently stands, though, began in the summer of 2016, and our current policy was to at least attempt to purchase at least one copy of every required textbook. This was made a little more possible because many of the courses share and reuse texts for multiple terms and even years. So oftentimes, as you may know, a professor finds a book that they really like, teaches some basics on thermodynamics, and they have the tendency to reuse it. Each term, library staff review the online bookstore. We go class by class, book by book, and see where we need to fill any gaps. The course reserves circulate for 4 hours with a 4-hour grace period, and then after that there is a late fee of $1 per hour up to $10 per day, and then the cost of the book is added to the student account after 14 days if not returned. And the course reserves collection currently contains 504 items, including textbooks, study guides, and DVDs. So our course reserves program is our most popular collection of all of our circulating books. So just to demonstrate, there are over 38,000 items in our main collection, and over 32,000 of those, about 84%, have never circulated. Comparing that to the 504 items in our course reserves, of which only about 115 or 23% have never circulated. So there's obviously quite a difference in popularity. Our most circulated book in the main collection checked out 138 times, while the most circulated course reserve has checked out 526. And just to show you, the graph to the right there compares circulation of the books in the main collection versus in the course reserves. And in 2019 alone, books from the main collection accounted for about 2,514 checkouts, while the course reserves accounted for 2,731.
Excellent. Thanks, Josh. So after a few years of our course reserves being up and running, we decided to start an assessment to see how it could be better. Obviously, the information that Josh just provided sort of piqued our interest, like it was a heavily used program. So using some of the data that he just mentioned and using even more fine-grained data that we collected on the course reserves program since it was started, we took a look at a couple of trends that we started to see. So the graph on your screen shows some overall trends over the 3+ years that we ran the program. The bottom line, the dark green line at the beginning, shows the beginning of the program. The light green line shows 2016, light blue shows 2017, and the dark blue shows 2018. You'll notice that it's a very well-used program, and towards the end of 2018, we saw our highest numbers yet. We also showed some cyclical patterns. So course reserves were used more often than in the 2 fall semesters, which we thought was relatively odd. We also noticed the peak and valley trend that happens. This was the aspect that really sort of intrigued us a little bit. It was clear that students were checking out books more at the beginning of the term, and then over the course of the term were sort of declining, but we had no idea why. And so we sort of wanted to ask them that, why are you doing this? What's happening here? Next slide, please. So this slide shows A section only. It's split into 2 sections. A section is on campus during January through March term and July through the September term. We were really confused by these numbers as well. We weren't sure why there would be so many checkouts in July, for example, and then a significant drop in the January term. The little humps in the middle of the July session were also very intriguing. We weren't sure what encouraged students to check out more course reserves in the middle of this session when you think they would already have their books or have figured it out, and then dip down again at the end. This trend in A section is quite different from what we saw in B section. Next slide. So B section always starts out strongly and then steadily decline throughout the semester. There's no middle of the session bump at all. And again, we were unsure why. All of this is to say that we really, really wanted to find out. We wanted to ask them just so that we could tailor the reserves to better fit each section's needs. Next slide. So in order to determine what we were seeing these trends between sections and within sections, we decided to ask the students about their use of course reserves. So we crafted 2 surveys. The first survey was going to be handed directly to students who checked out course reserves. It was designed to ask them what they found most useful and what they most wanted to see, so what they wanted to change. The second survey was going to be given to everyone who walked into the doors. This was meant to capture students who both did and did not use the course reserves to see if maybe we weren't advertising enough, or maybe, we weren't offering enough of the reserves, and that's maybe why people weren't borrowing them. So both surveys were distributed over 2 quarters during similar academic weeks and times in 2019, before the pandemic, to capture similar student environments. And we're going to take a look at these surveys independently. Next slide. So this is the first survey, the one we handed to students who actively use the reserves. As you can see, we had a variety of questions. Many of these questions gave multiple choice answers. We were basically just trying to tease out why students value the reserves program. If they use them for specific classes because those books were just more expensive, if we needed to go electronic so they could easily access the books anywhere, etc. So a huge variety of things we were trying to figure out. We got many more responses back from A section, which is not surprising because this section often uses the course reserves, as you can see by total checkouts, and as we saw in the first graph. And next slide, and I think it's back over to you, Josh.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so here we have the results for the first question from the first survey. This was the survey that we distributed at the circulation desk, specifically just to the students who were checking out the course reserves. So we knew that they were using the reserves, but we wanted to find out specifically why. So the first question is, why do you check out textbooks or course reserves? So whether to save money, too expensive, convenience, did they use them before their own books that they purchased arrived, to determine if they actually want to buy the books, Is it better for the environment or just something other? So we have them broken into A section and B section. So we've kind of alluded to before, Kettering University operates on a quarterly system, A section and B section. A section students are on campus for the summer and winter terms, and then the B section students are on campus for the fall and spring terms. So never the twain shall meet. So as you can see from the results of the first question, obviously the majority of the responses came that it was all about saving money or that they were too expensive. Also, convenience was a factor. That was the third highest result, but by far the biggest result as far as why do you actually use the textbooks, it has to do with saving money and that the textbooks are too expensive. So this was our next question. How often do you check out course reserves in one term? The results here are quite interesting because as you can see, A section, it was much more spread out, 1 to 2 times, 3 to 5 times, 6 to 10, more than 15. It kind of spread across the board, whereas B section primarily stated that they use the course reserves more than 15 times. So with A section, there were more responses and they were a little more diverse in their responses. But B section students, they said primarily, they were checking out their reserves more than 15 times. The next question we asked was, would you be interested in electronic book course reserves or online textbooks? At the time, this wasn't something that we were actively pursuing when we were distributing the survey. And so, we were curious. And more, as we expected, most of the A section students did say yes. More students for B section also said yes, and they were kind of tied almost exactly for those who said no, they're not interested. But overwhelmingly, they did say yes, they would be interested in electronic textbooks if offered. Next question we asked was, how did you find out about the course reserve program? Was it through orientation, faculty lecture, syllabus, word of mouth, librarian, or visit to the library, or other? As you can see here, these were pretty spread out. As far as A section is concerned, word of mouth is obviously the most, just from the students talking to each other. The librarian visit or a class trip to the library came in second, followed by the faculty lecture. Whereas the B section responses, you can see there that more people said that they learned about the course reserves from the professor's syllabus than word of mouth or a librarian visit. So it's interesting how those varied quite a bit. We often kind of say and hypothesize that the A section and B section students are very different in their behavior and their personalities, and I think some of these responses demonstrate that as well. And then we also asked approximately how much of your required reading do you access with the course reserves. And what I find most interesting about this question is that it really parallels an earlier question about how many times do you check out the course reserves throughout the term. You could almost overlay these on top of each other and they'll be very similar. So again, A section, there's more responses, but it's more across the board, 1 to 20%, 21 to 40, 61 to 80. Whereas the B section students, most of the responses said 81 to 100%. So thinking back to that previous question, more students in B section said, more than, 15 times per quarter. And here we have the B section students. So clearly the B section students use the course reserves more often and for more of their reading, whereas the A section students have a larger range of lending behavior and patterns.
Such a unique setup. I love it. So that was, recall, our first survey. Our second survey was designed to give all students, regardless of who, of whether they checked out course reserves or not. We were trying to determine how many students even knew about the program and if we were doing a good job promoting it. And we were also very curious to see how students felt about ebooks. Students at large, not just the course reserve students. So this survey saw an even number of responses, though interestingly, the gate counts were quite different. So you'll notice B section, the gate count was only 225, whereas for A section, it was 633. So I think that this is going to Marcy or Josh. I'm not sure who. I'm sorry.
Tis I. So after we got the results back, you can see that as a whole, more respondents to the, basically we attacked them at the door and offered them candy, use the course reserves than do not, but not very much difference. That makes sense to us because we tend to have repeat customers who come in specifically for reserves all the time. It's not normal for us to, for someone to ask for a book once a term. Usually it's the same people over and over again. And sometimes we can just see a person walk in and know what book they want and just go get it. Next slide, please. So we were curious as to what would possibly deter a student from using the course reserves, not even just why would they absolutely not want to? So as you can see here, the reasons that they gave us vary all over the place. The I prefer my own textbooks one is the most popular for the A section, and it's the second most popular for the B section, but the most popular one of them all is the all-encompassing other section. So that's the one that's we commonly hear prior to even giving the survey, and even after, would be students would tell us that they don't need to use our textbooks because they have access to them through other various means, i.e. illegal, potentially PDFs off of the internet. It's not really, some of them try to keep it a secret from us, and some of them just flat out say, oh, I can get that offline. Someone has downloaded it and I printed it off. So they figure they don't need to borrow our books or buy their own because they have their own potentially illegal copies anyway. And the students actually share that with each other. They tell each other about it. So the last, this next slide here, so you can see that even though it's a small margin amongst the groups regarding the preference of print books over ebooks, again, prior to the COVID, the slide shows that students they told us that they prefer print books over ebooks. And that surprised us because a lot of times we would hear that they wanted ebooks, but this doesn't match that up. So I found that to be the most surprising, to me, response out of the whole survey process, was that what we were being told was not what the survey results demonstrated.
Okay, thank you. All right, so obviously, all of the data that we collected, the survey results, it's fantastic to just have that information available for us to know, how we're doing, how the students are reacting to and engaging with the course reserves. But obviously, the main goal was to improve the program and to better serve our students. So here's some changes, improvements that came about as a result of our study of the survey. So the surveys did show that as popular as the course reserves program was, we could do a better job by actively promoting it rather than assuming students already do know about it. The course reserves student surveys provided ample feedback and suggestions for improvement, some of which we pretty much immediately adopted. For example, one of the suggestions that we saw oftentimes was that the students were interested in acquiring the recommended texts and not just the required. So we did. So it turns out, there weren't that many additional recommended texts. So assuming that it, fit into the budget, that it was something that we could actually acquire, we did begin purchasing the recommended texts in addition to the required books. Another change is that prior to the survey, the policy was that the course reserves were to be used inside the library. I think that's relatively common. But we got the feedback, they would like to be taken outside of the library. right outside of the library doors, there's multiple collaborative study spaces. We call them D spaces. You know, the students want to take the textbooks into the D spaces. The students want to take them into student housing. They want to bring them back to their apartments. And we thought, you know, what the heck? Assuming they bring them back, that was fine with us. And so we removed that, what we thought was kind of an antiquated restriction on access to the reserves. So we changed that and allowed them to take the course reserves out of the library. Other feedback was less feasible, but still constructive. You know, they wanted us to extend the loan period beyond 4 hours, you know, 8 hours, 24/7, etc. Also, of course, they wanted us to purchase multiple copies of each book, which would reduce turnaways. So obviously a significant portion of the budget's already spent on acquiring, you know, if we are purchasing every potential textbook that's being offered. So to also purchase multiple copies just wasn't something that we could do at the time. However, the biggest change came in the way of actively seeking and acquiring electronic versions of textbooks when available, which we did begin to do after completing the spring 2019 survey. So we saw, you know, even if it wasn't like a resounding yes, you know, even if it's just half of the students are interested, you know, we thought, what the heck? And so we began to actively seek viable, you know, legal electronic editions of the materials that were being taught. So a few goals and conclusions. The distribution of the course reserve student surveys resulted in a number of goals. One of those being that we also wanted to eventually survey the Kettering University faculty on their just kind of awareness and of the reserve program and kind of their engagement with the library. You know, do they make donations? Do they notify us of their texts, etc. We also wanted to learn more about and propose OER, potentially try EBSCO Faculty Select. We wanted to further remove barriers to access, you know, by allowing students to take the books outside of the library, by seeking and acquiring ebooks. In addition to that, removing fines from the reserves. That is something that we also did. We eliminated the $1 an hour fine. We wanted to remove any barriers that we possibly could. Of course, we wanted to increase usage, but ultimately we want to keep the students and faculty happy. In addition to these, we learned that no matter how popular a library collection may be, there's always going to be room for improvement, and even successful programs deserve thorough evaluation and assessment. Okay, so as I alluded to at the beginning of our presentation, up until this point, most of the content that you've seen was collected and created prior to this past spring, but obviously we all know what happened. And so here's just a few just kind of updates about changes that we've made, things that have happened to the university and to the library since last spring. So Kettering University went virtual for the last 2 weeks of our winter 2020 term. That was on March 16th. And then all of spring 2020, which was April through June of 2020, obviously as a result of COVID-19. So like it says there, our final 2 weeks of winter were virtual, but then we didn't have an extended break. So after our winter term ended at the end of March, we jumped right into our next full term in spring 2020. So it was kind of like we had those last 2 weeks of going virtual for winter, and then we started a whole new term completely remote. Obviously, we had limited staff in the library. Most were remote for that time. However, a few of us did kind of cycle in and out for the duration of the spring and summer. We didn't have any print circulation, which included course reserves. Also, a big change that took place was that the provost of the university required that all textbooks for the spring term must be available in some type of electronic format. So that was obviously a huge change. And as a result of that, the library immediately began to work directly with the faculty to find alternative textbooks. And we also created our virtual learning resources LibGuide. Another thing we talked about, previously it was simply at the time it was a goal for the future, but we immediately adopted Faculty Select and began working directly with staff responsible for the online bookstore. And also the university trialed Cengage Unlimited, which was free during the spring term. Many of you may remember that, at that time, many vendors extended free limited options, basically in March, April, May. But like I was saying, our spring term extended until June. So we worked out an extension of some of those free trials. So that was a little bit about what kind of changed with the library, with the reserve specifically.
Josh,
Yes,
sorry,
yeah.
You're coming up on a few minutes left until your Q&A time.
Okay, thank you. All right, so summer 2020, July 13th marked a new academic year, and we returned to the library. The textbook e-format requirement remained. The library continues to work directly with the online bookstore staff. Circulation of print materials and reserves resumes using our contactless Info2Go model and our Luxor One smart locker, as you can see over on the right there. Print circulation is obviously decreased, and we no longer purchase print textbooks, but we maintain the existing print course reserve collection. The reserves now consist of the existing print reserves, ebooks acquired via Faculty Select, OER, and Gobi, Vital Source through the bookstore, materials and PDFs provided by the faculty, and the library keeps record of all of that.
So that wraps it up for us. We're now ready for Q&A time. So if you have any questions, you're obviously welcome to just ask us directly now, but you're also welcome to email us. And it looks like we already have one. What is EBSCO Faculty Select? With apologies if this was explained earlier in the presentation. Josh or Marcy, I'll let you take this one.
So it's basically a portal that EBSCO kind of collects OER. So, they kind of, they're the hub. And then the faculty you can provide access to Faculty Select for the faculty, and then the faculty can, they can essentially request it, but they're basically just given a permalink, and then they can embed it into, into their Blackboard. They can email it out to their students, however they choose to distribute it. And then the library is given a notification that, that is a text that, somebody has at least selected or that they're interested in. So it's basically EBSCO's way of kind of, being the go-between. So, and it works for us using, Gobi as well. But that's basically what Faculty Select is it's kind of that hub. So Ricky asks, is the policy of not purchasing print textbooks going to continue going forward? I would say for the foreseeable future, as long as the electronic text requirement remains, it probably will, because basically what we're doing now is just kind of keeping up with what text the faculty are choosing, and we do get quite a few inquiries from faculty, before they even make a selection. They will contact us and ask, hey, I'm thinking of using this for my computer science class. is there an ebook version that, the students can access? And then, we look it up in Gobi, or sometimes, maybe they'll ask a librarian if there's a text that they can recommend, and they'll kind of help them out in that process. So for that reason, just kind of going along with, in support of the provost and the university decision that the faculty need to choose a text with an online option. Yes, we've, for the most part, stopped purchasing print textbooks, and actually we're purchasing very few print books for the library in general. That's something that we've really been experimenting with, is primarily, patron-driven acquisitions. For the most part, the only time that we're purchasing print now is if a faculty or student selects a specific book that is not a textbook, that there is no online version, and it's within scope. So for the time being, yes, we'll probably halt on purchasing the print textbooks. Thank you. Any other questions?
I was just about to ask the same question.
Yeah. So yeah, for the time being, as long as that digital requirement remains, we'll support the provost, and we're trying to provide access as much as possible, but also trying to help the faculty make that transition towards having a digital option.
And this is actually,
I was just gonna say, I have to ask, you seem really able as an institution to pick up EBSCO Faculty Select, Vital Source on the fly. Was there money allotted from the provost to do these things, or was this something you guys had to come up with out of the library's budget?
So Faculty Select was out of the library budget. So that was kind of an end of the year, acquisition. Vital Source, that's not something that came out of the library. So that's, that was worked out with the bookstore. So that's not anything that the library actually has to purchase. That's the agreement, I guess, that the university has made with them. And then the students obviously rent the texts. There was, we were briefly considering Cengage Unlimited, but ultimately it would have required, for the cost that it was, it really would have required a shift in the course curriculum that, we obviously weren't prepared to do. And so we ultimately didn't actually have to fork out any money for Cengage or Vital Source ourselves, but Faculty Select was part of the library budget. But now that we are purchasing, obviously so few print texts, pretty much our entire collection development budget is, digital resources now.
But what we do when we go through and check along with the bookstore to find out if we have that book or if we can acquire it in an e-format, we do make note of if Vital Source is an option, so that when students inquire, we can direct them to that. So we keep a note specifically, we keep a database, and we specifically have Vital Source ebooks that they could access to let them know if they have questions for us.
Yeah. And I see the question, Kettering does not require students to purchase any of their required texts. I would say they're not necessarily required. If they're able to, if there's a copy in the library, if they're able to rent them from Vital Source or Amazon, there is nothing that absolutely requires. They don't have to prove that. And different faculty obviously have different reactions to the use of print versus ebooks in their classes. We still have the occasional faculty that, doesn't want or allow devices, during tests, or we have, if they're using honor lock during a test that is administered from Blackboard, there's the challenge with using an ebook on the same laptop that's being used for a test. So there's definitely the obstacles that come up with the different access models, but I would say that they don't necessarily require it. If they have a means to get it either through the library or rental, that is fine.
So it looks like we have time for the last question there from Ricky. Before the switch to ebooks, did you find any evidence that eliminating fines on reserves had any impact on returning items?
We didn't, because it was relatively a short turnaround in time. I would say for the most part, and I think Marcy could speak to this as well, we didn't have a lot of issues with textbooks not being returned. By far and large, I think, it's a relatively small campus. The students, I think they know when they each have the books out, when the course reserves, when the students were all back on campus, the course reserves were going out a lot. So maybe there was a little peer pressure going on if they knew that, somebody in their class was using a textbook. So we didn't really have that much of a problem with textbooks not being returned in the first place. So by eliminating the fine structure, we didn't find that more textbooks were disappearing or not being returned, which is nice to see. And obviously now in the with the current environment, we did end up making some extensions on the lending times. We did eliminate the fines, and so the circulation has overall reduced.
Yeah, I don't think we lost a single, I can't think of one single reserve that was never, ever totally not returned. But there were a few holdouts who knew that they would get a fine. We deduced this, they didn't tell us this, but we kind of figured out that they realized that they would get a fine. But the fine did cap out, and I don't remember what the exact structure was, but it would cap out. And I think a few people, just a handful, maybe like 3 or 4, might have figured out that that fine, that once it capped out, was still less than the cost of the textbook. So once they returned it, the fines remained, but the cost of the book was removed from their account. So it was just a very few people who did that. And I don't think that there's any way, I would imagine that at least someone wouldn't have tried. We're always trying to find ways, right?
Yeah. We thought in various ways our fine structure was maybe preemptively punitive, and once we eliminated it didn't cause any problems.
Well, thank you so much, Josh and Jody and Marcy. We're at the end of our time, but I just want to remind everybody that you can always email your presenters if you have further questions. And please don't forget to fill out the event